Warning. The following show contains opinions that viewers may find offensive, complete bullshit, or otherwise may disagree with. Accordingly, the producers of Mr. Justin Ashley must insist that those viewers understand not everyone feels the same way they do, and ask they chill the fuck out. Also, there's totally spoilers. You've been warned. Seriously, there are major spoilers in this video. Once again, you've been warned. Well, fate has pointed me toward my next video. Just a few nights ago, I went to go see M. Night Shyamalan's latest film, Split, starring James McAvoy. So let's get the obvious huge spoiler out of the way here. If you haven't seen Split yet, and you don't want this surprise ruined for you, leave now. Okay, that's enough time. Split is directly connected to another film Shyamalan directed 17 years ago called Unbreakable. Yes, Split and Unbreakable exist in the same cinematic universe. It just so happens that I am a huge Unbreakable fan, and it was actually on my list of films to do an underrated video for. But once I left the theater, I knew now was the right time. Now, I'm not going to reveal exactly how Split and Unbreakable are connected until the end of this video. I first want to focus on why Unbreakable is so good. Unbreakable is a 2000 film starring Bruce Willis and Samuel L. Jackson. The plot goes something like this. A man named David Dunn, played by Bruce Willis, survives a horrible train crash that kills all the other 131 passengers on board. Dunn miraculously survives with no injuries at all. Dunn's miracle survival brings him to the attention of Elijah Price, played by Samuel L. Jackson. After the two meet, Elijah reveals that he has spent his entire life reading and analyzing comic books, and he believes that they represent a real connection to human history and evolution. He proposes to David that he may in fact be a real-life person of which the comics were originally based on. Or in other words, David might be a superhero. Elijah suffers from a rare disorder that leaves his bones extremely fragile like glass. The condition isolates Elijah, keeping him primarily housebound, where he develops his affection for comic books. David is depressed and in the middle of a separation from his wife. This creates a dreary home environment and an odd dynamic between him, his son, and his soon-to-be ex-wife. It is slowly revealed to us that David is in fact gifted with several abilities that he himself denied for years. And as the film comes to an end, David, with Elijah's help and guidance, embraces his abilities and begins to don a hero persona. I want to start by saying that Unbreakable is one of my favorite superhero movies of all time, and this film is criminally ignored and underrated. But why was such a well-made film ignored so much? Well, let's take a look at M. Night Shyamalan's filmography for a second. As you can see, Unbreakable came out at the unfortunate middle time between Shyamalan's much more popular and successful movies. The Sixth Sense, only a year earlier, and Signs, 2 years after. And it's not like Unbreakable didn't make money or anything, it was definitely profitable, but when compared to the other two movies I just mentioned, Signs and The Sixth Sense, which took in well over 3 times their original budget, Unbreakable definitely looks like a bomb. Looking back at that image from Shyamalan's IMDb page again, it's pretty clear to me what initially went wrong. Following the success of The Sixth Sense, which was undeniably a borderline horror film, audiences wanted another scary film from Shyamalan. And when they got a slow-paced drama instead, most people simply ignored the movie altogether. Then, Shyamalan makes another scary movie called Signs, and boom, audiences come back out in droves again. And I think that became the problem. People loved Shyamalan's scary films so much that Unbreakable quickly became forgotten. When I ask people about this film, the response is usually something like, "Oh yeah, I forgot he did that one," or "I never saw it, it didn't look interesting." Hanging on to that quote for a second, let's watch a snippet of the Unbreakable trailer.
You don't have a scratch on you. I know what's going through your mind right now. You're searching for meaning in all of this. Know one thing. 100% 131 people died so you could finally understand the destiny for which you were born. Are you ready for the truth?
It's definitely a competent trailer that doesn't reveal too much about the film, but sets up just enough to make you want to watch more. Well, it makes me want to watch more anyways. But now compare it to the Sixth Sense trailer.
You ever feel the prickly things on the back of your neck?
Yes.
That's them. They get mad. It gets cold.
How often do you see them?
All the time.
And how about the Signs trailer? It's clear, they're night and day, and I'm sure that's how people reacted. It was like, ooh, let's go see this movie, it looks really freaky, and then, I don't get it, it looks boring, what's it about? Unbreakable is just a hard movie to market, because you have to sell it entirely on the intrigue of the film's core mystery, i.e., what is really happening to Bruce Willis's character. If you market it as a superhero film, then audiences have a certain expectation, especially having months before, in July, already seen the original X-Men film. Which one would you want to see? Also, by acknowledging the superhero aspect of Unbreakable, you're spoiling the truth behind the central mystery in the film. Bottom line, Unbreakable was ignored and forgotten pretty quickly after its release. I myself was guilty of this for years. It wasn't until I decided to sit down and watch all the Shyamalan movies that I realized what a huge mistake I had made. However, while this film was largely ignored when it came out, it did receive positive reviews and a small cult following afterwards. It even made it onto the radar of Quentin Tarantino, who regarded it as one of his favorite films of the 90s and 2000s.
One, not only has Bruce Willis's best performance on film that he's ever given. I think he's absolutely magnificent in the film. It also is a brilliant retelling of the Superman mythology.
All of that out of the way, let's get into what I like about Unbreakable. Firstly, the tone. A while back I did a video on the Punisher film where I compared the grounded nature of that movie to the modern Disney superhero spectacle. Looking back, this exact same comparison works for Unbreakable. Unbreakable isn't a typical superhero film. In fact, it's so far removed from the formula, it borderline isn't a superhero film. And that's what I like so much about it. It all feels very real and authentic. It's dark, dreary, and at times depressing. But it helps us to actually believe these characters could exist. This tone carries through the entirety of this fantastic story. Unbreakable's story is well paced and a definite slow burn. But it's this slow, methodic pace that quickly engrosses you into the mystery surrounding the main characters. The film perfectly paces itself by slowly inserting flashbacks for the characters and scenes that flesh out the central mystery. By the time the credits begin to roll, you realize that you've just witnessed the origin story of a superhero and a villain straight out of a comic. But it's handled so articulately, it doesn't come across as rushed or even forced. I should quickly mention here that the largest twist of Unbreakable comes right at the end of the film. Samuel L. Jackson's character Elijah, who up to this point was basically David's guide, reveals that he himself is actually the villain in this story, having set up a series of disasters to find a metahuman such as David. I didn't mention this in my plot description because I didn't feel it was part of the core plot, but more of an earned reward for following the story to its conclusion. And let's talk about characters for a second. Both Samuel L. Jackson and Bruce Willis deliver fantastic performances. Bruce Willis captures the essence of a depressed man struggling with his destiny. And we see David evolve by the film's end as he finally embraces what makes him special. Samuel L. Jackson's Elijah, or villain persona Mr. Glass, could rank as one of the most interesting on-screen villains of all time. He isn't a typical villain. He's a broken man whose tragic disease has led him to take extreme measures to justify the purpose and meaning of his life.
You know what the scariest thing is? To not know your place in this world. To not know why you're here. It's just an awful feeling.
Switching gears for a second, I want to discuss the incredible depth to the cinematography in Unbreakable. In theater and film school, professors often refer to the background and set surrounding the actors that comprise the overall image as the mise en scène. Upon viewing Unbreakable for the first time, many viewers would be forgiven for missing out on the incredible set and wardrobe design at work here. David Dunn is given the central color of green. Much like a comic book character, this color follows David in his entire ensemble for the film, and even the house he lives in. Mr. Glass, on the other hand, is given a purple color scheme, and every scene he's in has some aspect of this color brightly represented, from his clothes to the wrappings from a birthday gift. But it's not just color that is effectively used in the film, it's also shot composition. After rewatching the film, you quickly begin to notice that almost every scene with Mr. Glass involves an aspect of Glass. From the first scene where he is born, and we only see him through a mirror reflection, as if he's been born in the glass itself, to a reflection in the glass TV screen as a child, or a picture frame as an adult, to the very glass cane that he walks around with the entire film. Man, remember when directors used to give a shit about what they put on screen? Remember when films used to be layered enough that you caught new things on every viewing? Finally, I want to make a note about how damn good the score is in Unbreakable. The score, composed by the very talented James Newton Howard, is a slow, reflective soundtrack that helps to carry the grounded tone of the film while picking up the right moments to add impact to the scene. Now, after having gotten through all that, let's talk about the cons of the film. Firstly, David's son, Joseph, played by Spencer Clark. Many people have talked about this film lament how annoying and jarring Joseph was in the film. Putting children into films with this weight of acting and tone is risky. They're obviously not going to measure up to the acting talent of the adults around them, but when used sparsely or effectively, they can be fine. He might have some goofy lines here or there.
You think you could have beaten up Bruce Lee?
No.
I mean, if you knew karate.
No.
But I don't think Joseph ruins any of the scenes he's in. But, I mean, people think Edward Furlong is the worst part of Terminator 2, so you can't please everyone. The only other thing I want to mention, and my only real gripe with this film, is the ending. From what I understand, Shyamalan wrote Unbreakable as a trilogy of films, with the origin story, Unbreakable, being the first film in 3. But due to the poor performance of Unbreakable, Shyamalan, for whatever reasons, decided to move on to other projects. So what we're left with is an ending that feels unfinished. In the final few moments of the film, we get these terrible subtitles that explain that David contacted the police and Elijah was imprisoned for his terrorist acts. It kind of blindsides you. Right when both hero and villain are revealed, it's like the film just cuts off for no reason. And this would be totally forgivable if Shyamalan had immediately followed up with Unbreakable 2. But the sequel never came, and fans were left clamoring for a follow-up for years. Even prominent Unbreakable fan Patton Oswalt appeared in a video on YouTube envisioning his perfect Unbreakable sequels. And now, it's time to talk about Split. Okay, so the big spoiler about Split is that it exists in the Unbreakable universe. But how? Well, in the final moments of Split, we see a small diner with patrons discussing the strange events of the film we just watched, and how James McAvoy's character reminds them of a similarly disturbed man who was locked up 15 years ago. Bruce Willis is then seen sitting at the counter sporting his David Dunn attire and chimes in the name of the man they're referring to, Mr. Glass. I was stunned. Probably the only one in the theater who got the connection at all, but I will always remember that moment in my theater-going history. So Split isn't necessarily a sequel to Unbreakable, but more like a sidequel of sorts. It functions as an origin story for McAvoy's character Kevin, who by the film's end has embraced his villain persona known as the Horde. Interestingly, the character Kevin, or the Horde, was in the original Unbreakable script as a side villain for David, but was replaced with a much more typical orange jumpsuit convict in the final draft. And I think this was a fantastic decision, as it left more room for the film to fully develop David and Elijah's characters. So now, what does the future hold for the Unbreakable franchise? Well, after Split premiered, immediately geeks began flooding the internet rags with gossips of a true Unbreakable sequel inbound, and from what I've read so far, it looks to be true. Shyamalan seems to be actively trying to resurrect the long-too-dormant Unbreakable series. Will Split do well enough at the box office to justify it? Who knows? Only time will tell. But for now, fingers crossed. Definitely, fingers crossed.